Welcome and thank you for stopping by Sheila's Audiobooks, and I am Sheila. This recording is coming from South Texas. All stories on this recording are in the public domain per United States copyright law. This story is about two men. One quick-fingered, flashy Slim Keene, lightning on the draw and snaky in a pinch. The other steady, square-shooting Grindstone Arledge, accurate, fair, and surefire. One pitted against the other. A life may be several in the balance of a moment determined by 6 guns. The Showdown. A 6-gun showdown. Emory Arledge, better known as Grindstone to his friends, leaned belligerently over the card table. His big body was rigid and cold all over. The cowboy knew that he was face to face with death. The grim realization did not make him cringe or back up 1 inch from his firm stand. On the contrary, the determined light in his gray eyes, and the stubborn set of his square jaws, showed very plainly that he meant to see the game through. On the opposite side of the table sat Slim Keene, the gambler. In Keene's little pale green eyes there was a warning glint. The thin face was as cold as a mask of marble. Keene had just turned a crooked card. For once his nimble fingers had fumbled. The bobble had been ever so slight, but the alert waddy, suspicions already aroused by Keene's steady winning, had caught the crooked deal. Yes, Grindstone knew that Slim Keene had cheated, and Keene realized that the cowboy knew. He could tell by the look on the puncher's big, bronzed face. Grindstone realized that if he accused Keene there in the presence of the other 2 men who were sitting in the game, the gambler would go into blazing action. He likewise realized that Slim Keene was speed personified. The long, slender fingers, rendered supple and kept trained by constant handling of cards, were as quick as glancing light. There was hardly another man in all the Southwest who could match Slim Keene's gun speed. As for Grindstone, he was as fast as the average range rider, but no faster. A man of peaceful pursuits of life who had never lived by his gun, he had cultivated accuracy of shooting rather than celerity of draw. No, he was not like Slim Keene, a wizard on the quick draw, but a more deadly accurate shot than Grindstone Arledge had never been seen in the Black Buttes country. As the cowpoke sat, strong face a little pale, looking into the bleak eyes of the gambler gunman, he knew that he stood not a shadow of a chance to beat Keene to the draw. He realized, also, that to utter the accusation which was in his mind would be virtual suicide. And yet, utter it he would. The stubborn waddy was not going to let any slick-fingered card cheat hand him a crooked deal and get away with it unchallenged. Keene's slender right hand was playing indolently with a pearl button on his fancy white vest. Grindstone knew, however, that the tips of those capable fingers were but a few inches from the butt of a pistol which reposed in a shoulder holster. His own big red hands were resting on the table. Despite the warning stare which Keene was giving him, Grindstone Arledge spoke, and his voice was as harsh as the rasping of a file. "Push them chips back into the center of the table, fella. I'm callin' for a re-deal, and this time she'd better be a straight one." The 2 other men who sat at the table looked surprised and startled. They gawked first at Grindstone and then at the dealer. Keene's closely chiseled mouth tightened. His eyes seemed to send out thin needles of icy light. "What are you getting at, cowpoke?" he questioned in a chilling voice. "Ya know danged well what I'm getting at," Grindstone flared. "I'm callin' a new deal 'cause the last one wasn't straight. Ya took that black ace from the bottom of the deck, Slim Keene." The man on Grindstone's left sucked in a quick breath and hurriedly deserted the table. The one on his right likewise slithered out of his chair and faded back. They were alone now, the husky, rock-jawed cowboy and the slender, cold-visaged gambler facing each other across the card table. For just a few more tense seconds they sat there like stone images, glaring into each other's eyes. Then it happened. With the speed of shooting light, Slim Keene's right hand darted for his hidden gun. Desperately Grindstone went for his own Colt. As he made the play he threw his big body to the left, hoping thereby to get his broad chest out of the way of the gambler gunman's weapon. He was not fast enough, for Slim Keene was as quick as lightning. Grindstone's Colt 45 had no more than cleared leather before Keene's blunt shoulder gun flashed into view and began spitting sizzling lead across the table. Thrice the gun blazed within a single split second. The three reports sounded almost as one. It seemed to Grindstone that two arrows of flame stabbed right through his barrel chest, that a firebrand raked across the side of his head. His brain gave one cyclonic whirl and then became numb. He realized dully that his heavy form had jarred to the floor. He felt as if he was spitted there by two red-hot rods of steel. He was breathing hard, his head ached. Slowly his gaze roved the room. The drinkers and loiterers had deserted the bar. Why was everyone staring at him so stupidly? What had happened? He saw the slender figure of Keene, the gambler, standing behind the card table. A snub-nosed black Colt was held ready in the man's right hand. Now he remembered. Keene had robbed him and then shot him. The dirty skunk. Grindstone could feel his six-gun still within his grasp. He struggled to raise the weapon, but he could not move a muscle. He felt paralyzed from head to toes. The gun slithered out of his feeble grasp to the floor. "Get him out of here," Keene clipped off. A sympathetic bystander went to the assistance of Grindstone. He helped the wounded cowboy to a sitting position and gave him a drink. Then other men came out of their places of safety. The gunfight was over. The two men who had been at the card table a moment before hurriedly took hold of the wounded cowboy and bore him out of the place. "Gosh, fella," one of them said in a low tone, as soon as they were out on the street. "You was plumb loco to make a play like that." "Shucks, man, it was suicide." Grindstone did not attempt to reply. He felt tired, very tired. He closed his eyes. It seemed that a sticky, black fog settled over him and that his senses melted into it. When he awoke he was lying on a physician's operating table. The serious face of Doc Crawford floated above him. The doctor was just putting the finishing touches to a bandage about Grindstone's head. At that moment the door opened and someone came in. Rolling his eyes aside, Grindstone saw that it was Slim Keene. The gambler was cold, emotionless, as always. "How about it?" Keene asked, and he nodded toward Grindstone. The doctor gave him a half-hostile glance, then answered shortly, "You'll pull through all right." He must have leaned away from those shots, for the bullets plowed outward, instead of driving straight into the body. Keene's thin lips twisted in a heartless smile. "Too bad I didn't drill him center," he remarked callously, in his taut, shilling voice. He came to Grindstone's side and looked down into the broad face. "Cowboy," he warned, "as soon as you're able to sit a saddle you want to fork your cayuse and unravel a lot of trail between yourself and Black Buttes. Understand? If I ever run into you again, no matter where, there'll be another shooting scrape, and next time you won't need a doctor's care." Grindstone breathed heavily for a moment, and then in a weak, gasping voice he replied, "Keene, soon as I'm up and about, I'm going to tell the world what a card cheat you are. Then me and you are going to have a six-gun showdown. Maybe you'll finish me next time, but at least I'll die with the satisfaction of knowing I put everybody wise to your crooked game." The gambler glared. Well, he knew that much talk about crooked cards would seriously hurt, if not completely ruin, his nefarious business at the Golden Eagle. "If you don't leave Black Buttes as soon as you're able to ride," he bit out fiercely, "I'll kill you." Swinging abruptly on his heel, he left the office. In back of Doc Crawford's office there was a single large room which the physician utilized as a sort of hospital ward. It was there that Grindstone Arledge stayed while recuperating. The period of his convalescence was short. Strong men and husky cowpokes recover rapidly from wounds. When he was able to be up and about, Grindstone did not immediately show himself on the street. He did not want Slim Keene to know how near well he was. He meant to be feeling fit when he went out to swap lead with the gambler gunman. He therefore kept out of sight and got the doctor, who hated Keene, to put out reports that he was recovering slowly. During the daytime he exercised by pacing the ward. At nights he would steal away from the place and take long rides under cover of darkness. Grindstone's cronies who came to visit advised him to leave the country. "You know Slim Keene just about rules the roost around here," they reminded him. "Ya wouldn't have a chance agin him. Nobody would in a gunfight. He's red lightning and sudden death. Life's a lot sweeter than pride, Grindstone, so you'd better just swallow the pride, cowboy, and hit the long trail." The stubborn cowpoke's reply to all these well-meant entreaties had been that he had lived in the Black Buttes district for 27 years, that he had been there before gold fever had brought human buzzards like Slim Keene flocking into the country, and that he meant to be there long after Keene and others of the gambler's kind were gone. Leave my own home stomping ground just because I caught a snaky gambler in a crooked deal? Like hell I will. I'm staying for the 6-gun showdown. And if you cowpokes were in my boots, you'd do the same thing. That last statement definitely settled the argument, for not one of those cowboy advisors but knew in his heart that if he were in Grindstone's situation, he would do just as Grindstone was doing. One day Dr. Crawford, looking a bit worried, came to Grindstone. "Cowboy," he said, "the time has come. Slim Keene knows you're up and around. Someone spied on you and reported to him. Keene stopped me on the street a moment ago. Told me to warn you that he was going to start looking for you at sunset and that if he found you he would kill you." Grindstone's heavy jaws tightened. His grey eyes narrowed just a little. For a moment he was silent, then he nodded slowly. "Yeah, I reckon the time has come." He went to his bed, lifted his belt and gun from the back of a chair, and drew the cartridge-studded strip of leather about his waist. "You haven't got a chance, cowboy," the doctor blurted anxiously. "Why go out there and get killed? Why not fork your bronc and hogtie that talk?" Grindstone cut in harshly. "I ain't running away, and that's final." The doctor shrugged. He turned and walked back into his office. Grindstone went to a rear window. For half an hour he stood there, slouched against the frame, staring moodily out into the open, thinking. Doc had spoken the truth. He did not have a chance. There was not a lead slinger in all the Southwest who could outdraw Slim Keene. Grindstone felt as if he stood within the somber shadow of death. Nevertheless, his determination was not shaken. He was still resolved that he would play the game to the end. "I won't turn loose of life until I've got in at least one shot," he promised himself grimly. "And I'll make that shot count. I ain't got Keene's flashy draw, but I've got accuracy. Yeah, he'll get me all right, but I'll take the polecat along with me as I pass." A bit sadly, his eyes took in a far sweep of rolling country. He knew every nook and corner of that vast strip of terrain. To the north lay the sand dunes of a semi-desert. To the west, 10 miles distant, stood a range of blue hills. Within them, and beyond, was Good Range, Grindstone's old stamping ground. He loved that country, he loved life. It was tough to have to part with it all. Well, he would go out like a man but not alone. Slowly he rolled himself a cigarette. 3 hours. 3 hours to live. The thought kept drumming in his brain. Keene had given him until sunset, and in 3 hours Old Soul would be touching the horizon. 3 hours to live. He stuck the cigarette into his slit of a mouth and felt for a match. Suddenly his probing fingers paused. For a full minute he stood as one petrified, gazing steadily toward the north. Slowly a light of discovery dawned in his grey eyes. A hard grin twisted his lips. "Keene's a lot faster than me," he said to himself, almost in a whisper, "but they ain't no man can shoot straighter than your ol' Uncle Dudley. Now if I could only get that snake into a situation where accuracy would count for as much as speed, that would give me a real chance." The grin widened. He nodded slowly. "Aha, Grindstone Arledge, I may thinkin' me and you have figured this here thing out." Grindstone hurried into the doctor's office. "Doc," he said, "ya brought a message from Keene. How about taking one back to the snake from me?" "Why, certainly," Dr. Crawford readily assented. He gave the cowboy a shrewd glance, evidently wondering if Grindstone had changed his mind about hitting the trail. "All right, then. Listen, and get it straight. Go down there to the Gold Eagle and, in a loud voice so's everybody in the place can hear, tell Keene my gun is in mighty bad shape and that I aim to spend the next hour or so cleaning it up. That soon as I'm through and ready for business, I'll fire 3 shots as warning, then I'm a-leaving this place and setting out to get him. Tell him that if he's got any guts in his system to step out through the front door of the Gold Eagle when he hears them shots and start walking up the street to meet me. Got it?" "Yes, Grindstone, but..." "Then go ahead and tell him, and be sure you break the news exactly as I've outlined it." "But..." The doctor paused and swallowed his protest. There was a warning glint in Grindstone's grey eyes. The stubborn cowardie was mighty tired of having people advise him what to do. "All right. "All right," the doc hastened to say. "I'll go." As he left the office, he added in an undertone, "But you're a fool, Grindstone Arledge. A plain damned fool." 10 minutes later he was back. "Well, I told him." The fellow smiled that cold, devilish smile of his and said, "You'd better figure out who you want to have your pony and outfit after you're gone." There were several men in the place, and they all heard what passed between him and me. I suppose the news is all over town by this time. "Good," Grindstone exclaimed. "That's why Keene swallowed my challenge, and that's why he'll go through with his part of my scheme, just as I've planned it. If he don't, the public might form an opinion he's yeller." While the battered little alarm clock ticked away the minutes, Grindstone sat near one of the back windows. His big hands were leisurely cleaning and polishing his Colt 45. Now and then he raised his head, looked out through the glass, and smiled. In the front office, Doc Crawford, deeply concerned for his young friend, fidgeted and pondered. He was wondering just what scheme Grindstone had in mind, but he did not want to ask further questions. After half an hour had passed, he could no longer stand the strain on his curiosity. Thrusting himself abruptly through the connecting doorway, he blurted, "Look here, Grindstone, what's all the mystery? What are you up to?" The cowboy motioned him close and then pointed through the window. "See that sky over there all painted a dirty red? Well, what about it?" "Doc, I was born and raised in this here country. I know it's every trick and whim. That red smear means a sandstorm is comin'. I reckon I've seen about 1,000 of 'em come whoppin' across the spread of sand waste out there. This one's due to arrive in about another 30 minutes. Just before she hits town I'll fire 3 shots to warn Keene I'm comin' after him. As the first dust devils go dancin' along the street, I aim to step out through the front door and, slow and deliberate like, start towards the Gold Eagle. Savvy the Eid, eh?" The doctor nodded. "I believe I do, Grindstone. You mean you're going to fight Keene while the sandstorm is blowing?" "Aha. With dust clouds fogging along the street and sand blasting eyes and faces, I reckon it won't be the quickest draw which counts. We'll both have our irons out when we come in sight of each other, and with the snap shooting we'll have to do, accuracy and gun judgment will count more than anything else. By jacks, cowboy. You've used your head. That scheme will give you an even break." The little alarm clock ticked off another 20 minutes. Grindstone was now ready and waiting. He stood beside the back window, watching the long cloud of dust which was approaching from the north, drawing steadily closer and closer. Now it was rolling over the dunes a mile from the Chimney Rocks. Now it had smeared out the streak of trees which marked the course of Antler Creek. Now it was closing in toward the town like a rushing tidal wave. Doc Crawford came in to report that the street was deserted. Evidently everyone meant to keep indoors until the lead slinging was over. Of course, everyone would try to watch the battle, but they would do so from windows, doorways, and alleys. Grindstone took another look through the window. The doctor looked out with him. "Well, it's here," the physician remarked, as he saw a tawny cloud rushing upon the town livery stable. Grindstone nodded. He hitched up his gun belt and carefully pulled down his gray Stetson so that it would not be lifted by the wind. He then turned and strode out of the ward, across the office, and onto the sidewalk. As the cowboy glanced along the street, he saw that Doc Crawford had stated the situation correctly. The town seemed suddenly deserted. Not a man was within sight, not even an animal. Horses had been removed from the danger zone, so as not to be frightened by the sounds of gunfire or struck by stray lead. The first gust of the storm hit town. It rattled harshly against frame buildings, blew grains of sand dancing and crawling along boardwalks, sent dust swirling and fogging along the street. Following the first gruff gust of it, there was a lull. During that moment of quiet, Grindstone Arledge drew his Colt 45 and fired 3 deliberate shots into the air. Leisurely, then, he proceeded to punch out the smoking shells and replace them with fresh cartridges. All the time his gaze remained riveted upon the Golden Eagle, 150 yards away. The front door remained closed. No one appeared on the threshold. Grindstone was a little surprised. Why had not Slim Keene emerged from his den? Had the gambler gunman misunderstood or forgotten the plan? Or had the final showdown found him yellow? "Look out for tricks, cowboy." Grindstone heard the voice of Dr. Crawford advising behind him. "That fellow's as cunning as a coyote. Something's wrong. He may be planning to The voice was interrupted. Whether the renewed rush of the storm had drowned it out, or the sudden appearance of Slim Keene on the doorstep of the Golden Eagle had caused the doctor to pause, Grindstone did not know. Keene was standing there, buttoning his black coat closely about his slender figure. His black hat was pulled low over his brow. He stepped down onto the ground, stood still for a moment, and then started slowly toward Grindstone. The next moment a sweeping, swirling smoke of grit blotched the form from Grindstone's view. "Well, Doc, here goes," the waddy called to his friend. Stepping from the plank sidewalk, he started down the street to meet Slim Keene. Keene, the superlative quick-draw artist, Keene the treacherous, the cold-blooded killer. The dust fog thickened. It was one of the worst sandstorms Grindstone Arledge ever had seen. The town of Black Buttes, situated at the north base of a great, barren hill, was wholly unprotected from the fierce winds which 3 or 4 times each year came booming across the arid stretch of wasteland that lay to the north. The air was harsh with drifting grit. An awful semi-gloom had fallen, a gloom that was portentous of disaster and death. The sun rested on the horizon. Like a great rusty disk of bronze, it showed dully through the roiling, boiling dirt clouds. Grindstone had taken about 30 or 40 steps when, above the snarling of the wind, he heard the bark of a pistol. Something plucked sharply at the collar of his shirt. The big waddy stopped dead in his tracks. His Colt .45 leapt from its holster. The shot which he had heard had come from his right front, just as a billow of sand-laden wind had rolled over him. Standing there, crouched in the middle of the street, gun poised, strong jaw out-thrust, eyes slitted, he waited for the air to clear. Grindstone was surprised that Keene had closed in so quickly and that the shot had come from a side of the street, rather than from the middle of it. Tricky coyote, he thought. Must have advanced at a run and then ducked aside and waited for me to show. With startling abruptness the billow of dust rolled by, leaving the air almost clean for just a few seconds. Grindstone saw a man leaning out from an angle of a store building, peering into the street. At sight of the cowboy, the fellow became confused and fired a hasty shot. The bullet winged within an inch of the waddy's stern face. Grindstone did not flinch, never moved a muscle. His own shot was deliberate. As it rang out, the gunman at the edge of the building gave a sort of despairing cry and slumped. Grindstone ran toward him. The killer whom the fighting cowboy had dropped proved to be not Slim Keene but one of the fellow's pals, one of 2 gunmen who usually hung around the gambler, acting as a sort of bodyguard. He had been drilled squarely through the heart. Grindstone's rugged countenance was harder than ever as he turned back into the street. So that was Keene's game. Realizing that his gun speed would avail him little in a gunfight out there in the storm, the cunning scoundrel, under cover of the blowing grit, had dispatched gunmen to help him kill the cowboy. Grindstone was like a stalking nemesis as he moved on. He had no idea of turning back just because he had discovered the odds were heavily against him. He was more determined than ever to find Slim Keene and shoot it out with the fellow, man to man. A sudden rift in the storm disclosed a second gunman, crouched between 2 buildings to his left. The killer had seen him first. Grindstone dropped quickly to one knee, blazing away with his heavy Colt as he did so. A bullet drilled through the crown of his hat, tunneling a swift course through his shock of stiff, sorrel hair. Jerking himself upright, the big cowpoke started plunging through the tawny haze, making in a zigzag course toward the spot where a sand billow had blotted out a human form an instant before. Evidently the gunman had started toward Grindstone at the same instant, for the 2 men met right at the edge of the boardwalk. They both stopped. Grindstone was the first, by a split second, to recover his wits. A bullet from his gun sent the man down with a bullet hole just below his right eye. A slug which the gunman fired dug harmlessly into the ground at Grindstone's feet. "That rubs out the second bodyguard and clears the way," the cowboy told himself grimly, as he reloaded the empty chambers of his gun. "Now it's me and Keene, man to man." The bronze disk in the west was now halfway below the horizon. The other half rested flatly on the skyline. The eerie gloom had thickened. Buildings and deserted hitch racks loomed weirdly through the haze. Grindstone stalked on, 6-gun held ready, glance flitting here and there in search of Keene. His first glimpse of the gambler was a fleeting one. A curtain of sand lifted just for an instant and then dropped, but not before it had revealed a skulking form dressed in black. Doubtless Keene had felt pretty confident that one of his gunmen had downed the cowboy. The sudden sight of the husky waddy striding along the street threw him into a panic. His gun spat viciously, just as the sand curtain fell. The miss was such a wide one that Grindstone sent a loud, taunting laugh ringing through the windstorm. Another shot cracked out, but the random bullet needled harmlessly through the gritty air. A long gust of wind rolled over the town. It set up a low, eerie wailing among frame buildings as it swept along. Sand and tiny gravel hissed and scratched as the particles crawled and scoured across hard ground. A dim black form showed through the darkening, dry fog. It leapt toward a hitch rack and crouched, partly protected by a cedar post. 3 times within a single second Slim Keene's gun spoke. Its red fire flared dully through the sand veil. The gambler's 6-gun was fairly spewing hot lead, but the shooting was being done from a distance of some 25 yards. At that range, and there amidst the haze with grit-rasping faces and grating into eyes, speed was not the most important factor of the gunfight. Keene's first bullet scorched Grindstone's rigid face. Another drew blood from the lobe of his left ear. The third dug between his left arm and his body, searing a hot course across his side. Grindstone had not let the fierce and rapid gunning rattle him. Deliberately he fired. His ball of lead hurled Keene away from the cedar post. A bullet laid open the cowboy's right cheek. He gritted his teeth and fired again, aiming for the patch of white vest which showed between the lapels of Keene's black coat. Keene's knees buckled a little, but he quickly jerked his sagging body erect. The gambler's gun blazed again. The bullet flew wide of its mark. This time Grindstone had been the first to fire. His slug struck Keene's narrow brow, slapping back the man's head. Keene flung his arms wide, stiffened, and toppled rigidly backward like an overturned statue. For just a moment the cowboy stood crouched, squinting at the quivering form on the ground. And then the storm threw a dark robe about it, clothing it from his view. Once more Grindstone reloaded his gun, turned and made directly toward the Golden Eagle. Men stared at him in awe as he entered the dive and slammed the door behind him. Lamps had been lighted. Their dull illumination fell almost weirdly upon the scene, hazed dimly by dust blown under doors and window sashes. A red festoon had spread downward from the gash across Grindstone's right cheek. He tried absently to wipe it away with the sleeve of his shirt, but succeeded only in making a gory smear. His red-rimmed eyes, with their dust-laden lashes, took in the room. They fastened upon Silver Jack McQuaid, cousin of Slim Keene and proprietor of the place in which the gambler had conducted his crooked game. Silver Jack stood behind the bar, hands spread out on the wood, staring like the rest of the men. Grindstone walked straight to him and paused, with only the counter between them. "Silver," he stated quietly, "Slim Keene and his 2 dry gulchin gunmen are dead. I reckon what belonged to him now is yours. In that card game me and him played here just recent, he crooked me out of exactly $60. I need the dinero to pay Doc Crawford for the repairs he made to me, and for some more he's going to make in a few minutes. Come on, shell out." "Look here," Silver Jack started into bluster, "you can't come into my place and hold me up." "Shell out," Grindstone repeated in a dispassionate tone, and his right hand moved down to the holstered 6-gun at his hip. Silver Jack weakened. "Why, of course, Grindstone," he hastened to say. "Here it is." He took 3 $20 gold pieces from the till and clapped them on the counter. Grindstone picked them up, then turned and strode toward the door. No one spoke or moved a muscle as the big cowpoke walked out of the place, turned toward Doc Crawford's office, and disappeared into the dust that was fogging along the street. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really hoped you enjoyed it. There will be more to come. Please subscribe not to miss out on what is next. I will be looking forward to your return. The music is by Madfan from Pixabay. To support this and other artists, go to pixabay.com. Sheila.